Hi, everyone. This is Bill, and welcome to our Judging Nightmares webinar. This is going to be a lot of fun today. We're really excited to have you with us. It's actually funny we're on this topic today. I actually just got off a Skype call a few minutes ago with the MIT Enterprise Forum Pan-Arab chapter, and they're getting ready for a big startup competition. And they actually have, I say big, they had 6,000 applicants, so huge, 23 or 21, 23 countries in that region all participating in this large startup competition. So it was really fun to get into that conversation with them today. They have, by reference of the questions that you all have already asked, they have many of the same questions that you do. So we're going to have, I think, a lot of fun going through these today. And certainly, I'm really looking forward to hearing all of your comments. And please ask any questions that you like, and we'll do our best to get to all, if not all of them. So let's hop into our topic here today. We want to talk about judging nightmares. So I'm going to go to my screen share mode here. I'm going to go off screen, and I'll come back on when we go to our Q&A time. So let's see. You should now be seeing my slides, and I'm going to go into presentation mode. Let's see, one second. There we go. You should now see my slides. So we're going to, we've got several slides to share, a bunch of different ideas around making judging reliable and informative. We will address your questions as well, and we'll do that towards the end. So I'm going to be off screen here for a little bit using these slides, and then I'll come back on to talk through the questions you previously submitted and any additional ones that you pose as we go on. So Steve Blank, many of you know, or at least know of, maybe you've read some of his materials. He said that incubator demo days encourage founders and investors to judge startups on the wrong criteria. And this is one of many problems we've seen with judging. And there's really quite an opportunity to improve many aspects of the communities that each of you is looking to build by improving how judging happens and the results that that judging creates. So we're excited to work with you on this today, and certainly let us know of any questions that you have as we go along. So here is an indication of some of the questions we received. We're going to go through our materials and then dive into these questions. We'll probably, I would think, in what we're going to talk about, we're going to probably address many of these today with our slides. But we're also going to come back to these and make sure that we, I'm hearing that my sound isn't working well. Okay, I am going to unplug my headset here. One second. Sorry about this, folks. Okay. I should have sound now. I apologize for anyone that we lost. I'm going to go back to my screen share. I apologize. Let's hop back in here. So I'm going to start at the beginning so that we make sure that we cover all this. So let's go back here. So just to start again, we're going to walk through this Judging Nightmares program, and I apologize that we lost you on sound there for a minute. I don't exactly know what happened, but hopefully the sound continues with us. So Judging Nightmares. One of the things I said off the top was that actually earlier today, I had a wonderful Skype call with the MIT Enterprise Forum Pan-Arab chapter, and they're getting ready for a very large startup competition. It actually happens in April, but this competition has 6,000 applicants, and they go through 3 rounds of judging that accumulates in a multi-day event. This year it's going to be in Kuwait, but really, really cool conversation. They have a lot of the challenges and had a lot of the same questions that you all have posed for this webinar today. So let's hop into it. First, many of you know and are familiar with Steve Blank. He said that incubator demo days encourage founders and investors to judge startups on the wrong criteria. This is something that we see all the time, and not just the challenges around criteria, but really the whole judging process. And really, when we judge well, when we create reliable results, there are a lot of byproducts that help develop and enhance our community. And in fact, I think what you'll see in what we talk about today, it's really foundational to our community development. So these are the questions that have been posed, and we encourage you to add to this list. You have the ability, whether you're joining us via YouTube or Google+, to submit additional questions. We invite you to do that. The agenda, we're going to talk about some background, talk about some of the challenges in terms of what challenges judging, and then look at some opportunities and steps to success. And then we'll dive into your questions, and I'll come back on screen for that section. So a little bit about me. I founded this company, Test My Pitch, about almost 3 years ago now. And as that I go to about 100 pitch events a year. So I end up seeing a lot of good processes, a lot of challenging processes. The one disclaimer here is that, we haven't seen everything. We're pretty good students and growing students of this process. But what we're going to talk about today plays a certain set of scenarios. It probably doesn't anticipate every possible scenario. And so we certainly would love to have follow-on conversations with any and or all of you to talk about your specific situations. But we're going to share a lot of what we've seen and a lot of what we feel can make judging a much stronger process so that you're making better decisions, creating the much better outcomes than maybe you were previously. So just so you have some context and you know what we do, and the goal here isn't, we're not aiming to sell anything, but just so you have some context about what we do. We have 2 tools. One is called Test My Pitch. It's an online platform where groups of individuals, it could be students, it could be professionals, it could be entrepreneurs, develop their communication skills. So think of it like if you took the notion of Toastmasters and put it online. So it's private collegial communities for communication development. The second tool is Score My Pitch, and actually very aligned with what we're going to talk about today. And we'll actually have some examples of this tool integrated just so you can see what's possible. But Score My Pitch is an online pitch event judging and feedback system. And so maybe the easiest way to think of it is it replaces the piece of paper that you might use to have judges score the event on. It also has audience scoring features and so on, but it's essentially improves the reliability of judging pitch events. So let's get into the background, and this is really where it starts to get interesting. So when we look at pitch events, we really want to understand, in order to judge well, we want to have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish when we have a pitch event. So pitch events really come in three different flavors, and so the first flavor is probably on the lighter side. It's at the early stage, and it's really about engagement. It's about getting somebody to have their first experience, and the result we want from that is to have them commit to a second experience. And so it's that simple. It's really about how do we get them in the movie, how do we get them in the community, and allow them to have a taste, have a nibble, have a good experience, and again, commit to a second. The second type of pitch event is one where we're aiming to educate. So we want to take this set of participants, these ventures, and move them to another level. And so you could say that all pitch events have that as an underlying goal, but there are some that's the primary goal. And then the third type is a selection or funding event. And so again, they might want to engage, they might want to educate, but the primary goal is to either select or to fund or both. And so each of these three really have a different set of rules and different variables that you'd consider depending on which level that is sort of the core type or purpose of pitch event that you're running. So that's one sort of background piece. The other background piece is to talk about the program stages. So if we're looking at different types of pitch events, then they usually fit within specific programs. They may be within curriculum in a school, they may be, or a university, they may be within an accelerator or incubator or some type of community organization that is fostering pitches. They also might be in enterprise or corporate settings where people are pitching their ideas. But usually these fall into a few stages. They'll be similar to what we're looking at in terms of the event, the types of events. So the program stages, sometimes we have programs that are just simply very light and again aimed at engagement. Others are aimed at education. And then others are aimed at selection, funding, or exit. So in other words, you graduate from this program, and we're part of the stages that we're going to deal with is how do we prepare you for the next program, a next level experience. Maybe you're going from a university into the greater ecosystem, or an accelerator or incubator into the greater ecosystem, or whatnot. Or maybe you're going from sort of this corporate pitch to actually spinning off a subsidiary division to actually implement that idea. Whatever the situation is, it's important to understand what stage that our given event or program is at, so that we properly attract the right participants, the right ventures, and then construct our programming to complement that. So now that we have some background, let's talk about the top 5 judging challenges. There can be some pretty significant challenges when it comes to judging. So these are the top 5. So if we have inappropriate stage and venture misalignment. So in other words, the event is being constructed around maybe it's entry level or the engagement stage, but yet these ventures have had years of experience. They have customers and so on, and they're not at the entry level. And so it's really about the challenge being that quite often that there's misalignment there. And I can give you an example. I was just recently at a pitch event where it was a very entry level sort of freshman in college business plan type event, or business plan competition type event. And they were using the criteria that they were using was exceptionally sophisticated. And so it was, essentially assessment around funding, when, the students barely sort of had any sense of what it was to do customer discovery or any of those types of things, let alone get funding. Their venture barely had a name. And so there was real misalignment there. And this kind of leads us into the next challenge, which is misaligned criteria. And so, not only can we have the stages and the ventures misaligned in terms of the level that they're at, but that the criteria doesn't fit the level that the ventures are at and the stage of this particular program. And so we need to make sure that the criteria is also aligned. And then the third challenge is that there's a lack of judge and venture orientation. And we see many organizations will do some level of orientation for the judges, but actually very little orientation for the ventures. And so it's really important that both parties get oriented, and we'll talk more about that as we go into it. But ultimately, what we see happen here is, when we talk about orientation, do the ventures understand the criteria that they're going to be judged under? And you'd be surprised, but many events that people that the ventures or students or entrepreneurs will go to, there will be criteria, but they won't be well publicized and or promoted. And so either the individuals come to the event with no sense of the criteria, or sometimes the criteria even change up to hours before, or the judges sort of use their own criteria, or whatever the case might be. But it's almost, imagine it like if you were going to an exam and you thought you were going to a biology exam, but it turns out the professor decided to give you a chemistry exam instead, and so you're answering all the questions related to biology, yet the professor is grading it as if it was a chemistry exam. And so, ultimately, we want to know how we're going to be graded, because we don't want any mystery in this. We want to set people up for success. So orientation is really, really important. There's also a phenomenon in judging, particularly if you're using paper, where judges' scores skew. And this happens actually not just in pitching, but really in any type of judged event. It could be figure skating, it could be gymnastics, but it's very normal that there is fluctuation in judges' scoring. And usually it happens after the third or fourth performance. You'll see, more often than not, judges' scores will get easier, but there'll be occasions where they'll get harder, and it's not really important which direction they go. But the issue is that they're not consistent, and ultimately then the scores that result are not informative about who did better. And that's really what we want, is for those scores to actually be informative. And then the fifth and final challenge, at least for our discussion today, is that there can be poor execution. And there are a variety of areas where this can happen. So we're obviously right now looking at a judge's room where they've already seen the pitches, they've used their paper ballot to score them, and now they're in this room taking an inordinate amount of time talking about these different ventures and coming to some consensus. And the challenge here is that more often than not in these rooms, there can be louder individuals, in other words, more charismatic or forceful individuals, who really, what you'll see is there's a whole nother level of judging that happens. So they've just gone and they've viewed these ventures and they've written down on paper their viewpoint, but when they go in the room, suddenly one or two people have undue influence on the rest of the pool, because they'll take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to build a sense of each other's perspective. It takes quite a while. And in that time, the more charismatic individuals will tend to be able to manipulate the conversation so that their point of view becomes what actually gets reported. And so, and this isn't done, it's normally not done in a vindictive or challenging way, only in that it's a dynamic of human groups. And so because they have to spend this inordinate amount of time trying to understand each other's perspective, and it's all done orally, there is sort of a second set of skewing that happens as that consensus is built, and in fact it's really contrived at this point. The second area where kind of primary area where execution can be challenging is that all of this information, all of this sort of community knowledge isn't community knowledge, in fact. In fact, most of these events are really not transparent at all, and that it's in a very limited occasions are results in any form shared. So in other words, take this from the venture or entrepreneur standpoint. They go and they pitch in an event, and they let's say, for example, they win. They finish in the top three, and they even win. So they get some neat trophy, or they get a couple $1,000s or whatever they get. But at the end, when you go up to these individuals and you say, congratulations, you won, and they go, thank you, and then you say, well, can you tell me why you won? They'll look at you with the most blank stare you've ever seen. And this happens, I've asked this question of hundreds of people who've won pitch events, and not once has anyone been able to tell me why they won. And if you go to the people that didn't win, they won't know where they stand in the scale. If it was an event with 20 pitches or 50 pitches or whatever, they won't know where they stand anywhere from 4th to 50th or more. And so they don't know what they didn't do that the person that won did, and that one did that they didn't do. And so there's no ability to model and improve how they go. And it's actually kind of a funny phenomenon of entrepreneurship. If we were in art school or many other sort of creative disciplines, this information is democratized, it's shared, and in fact you can model other people and learn from their good performances and sort of adapt your skills to better and better levels of performance, because you have examples of success. And if you don't know what makes someone else's work better, it's very difficult to mimic and model that, because you may be mimicking and modeling all the wrong things. And so we're kind of Darwinian in our approach to entrepreneurship education. And the real opportunity here is, how do we give super examples where it's much easier for the ventures and entrepreneurs to model that success, and in fact stand on the shoulders of previous participants. So let's get into the opportunities and how do we get to success, because that's really what we're here for today. And the first is, we need to define the venture stage and the event objective. Real important and real simple. So are the ventures at a novice stage? Are they intermediate? Are they advanced? Pretty straightforward. And then is our objective, for whatever stage they're at, is our objective to engage them? Is it to educate them? Or is it to select, fund, or help them exit? And all of our programming, how we design our event, should be aligned to those two constraints. Are our ventures sophisticated or nascent? And then what's our objective for them through this event or program? And then from there, we want to create and align the criteria to that stage. And again, that misalignment can be really challenging. I mean, if you go to your first event and the evaluation you get is, you don't even understand it because they're talking about sophisticated concepts that you haven't even heard of yet, then you're probably not going to go back. And so it's, how do we create that alignment? So one of the things we're going to share with you after today's webinar is we've developed a criteria development worksheet. And this is a free tool, can be downloaded off our site, but we'll email it to you in our follow-up. And this will walk you through the process of how to develop criteria that is aligned to what we've talked about today, to where your ventures are, what your goals are, and then ultimately what's important to be measured by this pitch. And so we'll keep this document, will keep you very much in line with your venture level sophistication and your program goals, and help you develop criteria that are going to be much more meaningful to what you're trying to accomplish. So some of what you'll see when you go through there is we want to align the criteria with the ventures and the objective. And so what we're going to look at is, when we're at the early stages, at the engagement stage, we want to make sure our criteria evaluate things that drive those individuals' commitment? How do we get them to come back for a second experience? And so we want to be more positive in terms of how we evaluate. And so as we move down into the more sophisticated levels, into select, fund, and exit, we want to become more direct. And because if we're superficial with more sophisticated individuals, or excuse me, or ventures, if we stay superficial with them, they're going to disenfranchise. They're going to opt out. They're not going to find any substance in what we're doing. And we really need to go to a place where we're giving them substance, not only in order to help them fulfill their goals, but also to sustain their interest. If we're superficial and just sort of blowing smoke, it doesn't help them. And so being more direct and focusing on improvement is key. And it's funny because when we talk to organizations, quite often they're resistant to be direct because they think they're going to hurt somebody's feelings. And we hear a lot of this, everybody's got to win a trophy or whatever. But having talked to literally thousands of founders, there is the thing that founders want the most is direct communication, particularly as they get to a more sophisticated level. They want to get to understand perspective really well. So another way to look at this is, at the early stages, we want to focus on form. We want to focus on more on the presentation. And then as the goals get a little more sophisticated, we want to focus on substance. And so early on, it's probably going to be 90% about how they presented themselves. Sort of what did they develop a story? Were they communicating with good eye contact? Were they loud enough? Did they enunciate their words? Did they have good cadence, and so on? And only maybe 90% on form, and then maybe 10% on substance. And then we were going to flip that when we go to the later stages to being more 90% about substance. Is this a viable business? Will it scale? All those types of things. Is it a good team? And a much smaller percentage at that point about the form, about how they said it, and more important, about what they said. And so it's important that when we're building our criteria, that we understand that we need to move the assessment, that the general types of assessment that we're doing, from form to substance as we get more sophisticated. So here's actually where most folks fail. So generally, we see fairly good criteria when we go out and work with organizations, but it is really, really rare that organizations have a stated context to their criteria. So there are a bunch of questions around, sort of judges going off the reservations, not following the criteria, and so on. And having sat in many, many, many judge rooms, I would say, for the most part, I haven't seen a situation where judges don't follow the criteria. It's just they apply their own context. And so maybe they're a practicing attorney, or maybe they're a seasoned entrepreneur, or as some say, a serial entrepreneur. And so they're going to come at whatever criteria you give them lacking context. They're going to come at it from their own context. And so whatever their paradigm is how they're going to apply those criteria. And it's really important that the organization has a stated and obvious and open criteria, so that context. And so a context for an event and criteria might be, we're judging the most scalable and fundable ventures, or it might be which idea is best, or it might be which venture or team learned the most in going through our program. So the evaluation is not going to be about scalable and fundable, but it's going to be maybe more about the customer discovery they did, and the level to which they got out of the building and learned and opened themselves up to that process, and the quality of the information they got back in their customer discovery. So it's really about context. And so it's not just about, okay, we have to have a context, but it's making sure that it is a very obvious part of whatever orientation that we do and whatever information that we provide to the judges along with the criteria. It should be, the context should be very, very obvious. And I think what you're going to find is a lot of the issues you have around judges being compliant and aligned, judging aligned with your objectives, go away when you have very clear context. So we want to next orient the ventures and we want to orient the judges. So when we get into venture orientation, first and foremost, sort of an overlying thought around this orientation is, the orientation is our whole community. And so it's, first and foremost is how do we democratize the process, which that just simply means we want to share it. We want to be the town crier. We want to let our community know, we do a great job of promoting the date, the time, maybe who the judges are, maybe who the ventures are, and so on. But what's the process? How are these ventures going to be evaluated? And what's the process the judges are going to go through in order to define a winner or reveal a winner? And so it's how do we let our community know what the process is and really be transparent in that. And it should be, this should be information that's very easily accessible to our community, because what you have to think about is you're building these programs is that each program is a promotion for the next version. And so the better each version is, the better a promotion it is for the next version. So everything that we socialize related to this program is a promotion for the next. And some of the better programs that we've seen or had the benefit of going and visiting over the last couple of years, some of the best you'll actually see in the audience, and this has been actually remarkable at some, where as much as 50% of an audience for a particular event are prospects for the next year or the next class to go through it. And it's really remarkable. And so if you think about that, even if it's 10% or 5%, the opportunity to engage and enroll those people in the next version of this event or program is really pretty dramatic. And so the experience that they have and what they see will allow them to commit, and not just commit, but to perform better when they actually get in the doors. And that's really what you want, is that not only that commitment, but also the strong performance, because that's going to change not only those specific ventures, but it's going to change your community, because the better a venture or better types of companies that come out, the more the rest of the community is interested, from the investors to the entrepreneurs, the complementary entrepreneurs, to the universities and faculty and so on. So it's the community builds with quality and quantity, I suppose. So we want to do some venture orientation. There are a lot of things that we could share, and it's probably not necessary that each one of these gets shared in each program, but here are some ideas, and again, you want to pick out the ones that fit your situation. But certainly everybody should know the objective of the event. In other words, what's the context? What are the criteria? If there's a Q&A part of this, then we want to help the ventures understand how do they take advantage of that time. Number one, they need to be good at listening. They need to hear questions well and only answer the questions that are asked. They should have someone on their team assigned to take notes during any Q&A or response back from the judges. This communicates a lot of things. Number one is it allows you to capture what's being said. Number two is it communicates to the judges that you're interested, that you're actually taking this serious, and you respect what they're saying. We want to teach people how to respond to questions so that they're not challenging the question or defending themselves, but that they're actually responding to what's being said. Maybe they even have appendices slides so that they're prepared to respond and have anticipated certain questions. That's always a really positive thing. We want to help them understand how to use and digest and then action the feedback that they're given. Maybe there's some follow-up that's appropriate with the judges or anyone else that is giving feedback at the event. And so that, again, it's learning the professional etiquette for this part of the process. And maybe you have some program tips that can be shared during this orientation, or maybe there are other sort of complementary or associated programs that would help them be more successful. Ultimately, the venture orientation is about helping to set these ventures who are going to be pitching up to have the greatest experience and to be as successful as possible. Because not only is your event a promotion for your event, but how these people perform is a promotion for your event. I was talking to somebody actually who came to a pitch event. They came from actually out of state, traveled a couple hundred miles to go to this pitch event, and they were a fairly sophisticated angel investor, and unfortunately the pitches were awful. They were really, companies that weren't ready for funding, and really not even that good pitches, not even that good a story or storytellers. And so here you have somebody who has committed themselves and to come to this event, and they are really interested in being a part of this particular community, and they had a bad experience, and it really doesn't matter what this organization progresses to in the future. Unfortunately, this person won't come back, and unless there's some huge carrot there. But that's really misalignment, and if the performance of those ventures were better, and if they were more appropriate for investment, this person would have been back and they would have brought their friends. And so it's really about how do we use these occasions to continue to build our community. So it's not just about these 4 or 5 or 6 or 20 ventures that are going to pitch. It's really about everybody in the audience and the value proposition to keeping them engaged and having them bring their friends and so on. And that's making sure that these ventures are successful is a big part of that. So now let's talk about the judges. So your judges certainly come from a variety of different backgrounds. They may be investors, they may be executives, sponsors, faculty, entrepreneurs, or mentors, and maybe even some other categories. And so it's really about, they're going to be varied in terms of their background and so on. So how do we help them be successful? And so we want to make sure they understand the event purpose and the context. They should understand the criteria, the event format, the scoring process, and if there is going to be a judge meeting or caucus where winners are determined, then they need to understand how that's going to work. Now, this can be delivered simply. It could be 10 minutes before judging starts. There could be a judge meeting. That's kind of on the very quick hurry up offense side. On the other hand, there may be a conference call, or it may be a pre-event meeting. It really depends on the sophistication of the particular event and what works best for that audience. But ultimately, this information needs to get transferred over to the judges so they know how to perform. That's really important, and you want them to feel like they're a part of it and be successful, but at the same time make it light and not over obligating for them. So the next thing that we need to kind of talk about and work on is, we talked about score skewing. So we need to create a situation where scoring is reliable. So it's important that scoring be reliable for a few reasons, right? We want to have reliable results will help inform whatever decisions we're making, whether it's a funding decision, whether it's a program entry decision, or whatnot. And it may be that we're not making decisions from this particular event, but if we are, the results will help us better, and more reliable results will help us make better and more informed decisions. No matter what the purpose of our event is, the results have an incredible educational value. And so if the results aren't reliable, the educational value goes down significantly. But if they're reliable, if they are based on something of substance, then they are incredibly nourishing to the organization and to all the ventures that participate, whether they win or are last. It really doesn't matter. This is a huge educational opportunity. And then reliable results are also important because they retain and educate and engage the community. And so having this information available will help our community stay invested in what we're doing. And the fact that we don't democratize this information and share it just doesn't help people, number one, want to come again. It doesn't help those that are in the audience say, I want to go through this because I know what I'm going to get a lot of information out of this. And it does take a little bit to transition from not sharing this information to sharing it. There's some sensitivity that people have to this information at times, but it's funny, again, if you went to art school, all critiquing is democratized. And so clearly other vocations have figured it out. We just need to transition through this with regard to entrepreneurship, learning, and education. So another area where we can help with skewing, so that kind of, and I didn't want to out anybody by stealing someone on the call's scoring sheet, but this is what a typical scoring sheet looks like. And this just happens to be a Toastmasters scoring sheet. But in this case, you see some criteria, and then you see different values that can be assigned to each criteria, and ultimately just a very simple rubric where a judge would fill in their responses to how this particular performance was with regard to their to these different criteria. And so the challenge of this is how skewing happens is that when I'm judging if I'm using a document like this, I have no sense of how each performance is being weighed against another. In other words, it's a very abstract process. I score one venture or one pitch, and I move on to the next one, and I just keep scoring as well as I can, but it has very little reference to previous performances. And so what you end up seeing is a real fluctuation in terms of how judges weight certain performances on the various criteria. And we don't really care if a judge is an easy judge or a hard judge. We just want them to be a consistent judge. And when they're inconsistent, you end up with a situation where the ultimate ranking that gets created isn't really representative of the viewpoint. And that's really where the system fails the goals in the process. And so an alternative, and this is a screenshot of our tool called Score My Pitch. And again, the point here isn't to sell use or subscription to the tool. The point really is to show what can be done differently. And so you'll see the ventures on the left, the criteria across the top, and then you'll see two yellow columns, the total and rank. Now, while the judges are judging, those yellow columns dynamically calculate. So no matter where a judge is on the ballot, whether they're judging the first team, the 10th team, or the 100th team, they know exactly where the current venture that they're working on, as they're scoring them, they know where that venture is ranking relative to all the others they've judged. And in fact, they can go back and make adjustments and ultimately submit a ballot that reflects their sense of the rank of whatever number of pitches they just saw. And so what you end up with, whether you have 2 judges or 5 judges or more, what you end up with is every judge submitting a ballot that the rank that they submit resembles their viewpoint. And of course, as you aggregate that information together, you're going to get a much more accurate overall ranking, because it's really a weighted ranking is what you end up with. And so that's really the goal of this. And this is how you eliminate or at least significantly minimize skewing. And this is really one of 2 significant areas in judging where the scores skew. So that's number 1. And certainly additional questions on that, let us know. And then it's really about execution, and this is where we're going to get into the second place where things skew a bit. So understanding the event goals, what are we trying to accomplish? And so here are some that we'd suggest. Number one is we want to identify and recognize success. So as an event goal, we want to help identify what's going on in our community that's really strong. Two is we want to develop and or educate participants. And three is we want to engage and enroll the community. And we've talked about this already, but ultimately this, whatever this event is, and the judging that happens in it can really act to engage and enroll additional participants in the community, and as a minimum retain the participants we have. If there's good substance, if what we're doing is important and reliable, then we're going to tend to find, you know, not only that we get more participants, but that we get better participants. And I see this all the time where, you know, the sort of lower quality events, you know, there's sort of almost a chicken and egg thing where, uh, we've sort of we used to have really great attendance, and we've kind of transitioned to this place where we're not getting, you know, as many good investors to come or whatnot. And more often than what you find is that the quality of the ventures that are participating it has gone down, and that's what's precipitated the investors and other community members from no longer participating in those events. And so it's really about, you know, you got to incrementally improve the quality of the ventures, and that begins to incrementally improve the quality of the attendees, i.e. investors and so on. And then as those improve, you get even better ventures. And as those ventures improve and get better, then you get even better investors and so on. And so it's how do we drive that? And a lot of what underlies this is the content. It's really about, is our event valuable? Does it provide value to the people who are participating? And if it does, then that's something to promote, and that's something that people will commit themselves to, not only today, but over time. And that's really what we want to get to. So execution keys. So it's just some thoughts, and these are some things that, you know, again, don't fit every organization, but maybe a possibility. One thought is to nominate within any judge panel or program is to nominate a head judge. They can do everything from help you recruit judges and maybe even improve the quality of judges that you have. They can also act as an orienter. They also know the community, so they're respected, and that can be helpful. And it's always good to, I mean, this is a way we grow the community, is to get other people committed to doing things. I would strongly suggest having a judge facilitator, and this is somebody that sits behind the judges while they're judging, answers any question, gets them anything they need, does, you know, sort of acts as their shepherd in the process. They also would be the one to go into the judge meeting, if there is one, a caucus, and they would facilitate that. So they would keep the judges in the box and on track, and help facilitate through that process. This can really be very important to making sure you get to a place of reliable results. Having an MC, so we talk about, you know, the judging itself. You know, part of, I was just at an event last weekend, and there was very little time between pitches, and so the judges never felt like they caught up. And so having an MC to sort of control things, number one, start and end on time. To orient the audience, prepare the audience for what's going to happen, walk them through it, and they can, you know, have a little bit of conversation between pitches while judges are finishing up their assessment of the previous pitch. So the MC controls the pace of what's going on. All really, really key. And then finally, another execution key, and we've talked about this, is democratizing the results. And this will have a variety of effects that will be really positive, and we'll actually talk about those right now. So when we think about results, so this is results actually represented in our system from an event, and this is actually results from a startup weekend. There were 5 judges at this event. There were 11 ventures, and so you'll see the ventures down the left, the criteria across the top on the left-hand side in the white columns, and then in the yellow you'll see the total or aggregate scores. There was some audience voting, very little, and then you'll see all the text comments to the right, and there are actually 2 more columns you can't see. There's strengths, and then there's recommendations, and then there's audience comments. And I'll identify 2 things here. So if we go through this, so if we look at these results from the judge's perspective, the judges have this, so what changes when judging has its second opportunity to really fail in terms of skewing results is when you go into those judges' rooms, more often than not, there are no results available. And so the judges have to take an inordinate amount of time, maybe 15, maybe even 20 minutes, to confer to actually understand each other's perspectives. And so it takes a long time. And what ends up happening, and this happens in any type of group dynamic situation, is there ends up being one or two people who are more charismatic. Maybe they're louder, maybe they're more impassioned, but they begin influencing the viewpoints of the rest of the participants or the rest of the judges. And what ends up happening is really a second set of voting. And so the results or the ultimate results end up less being a consensus of all five judges or whatever number of judges, but more skewed towards the viewpoints of one or two judges and less from the other three or four judges. And so you end up with this whole weird type of skewing because the results, the tabulated results aren't available. And so in a system like ours, you actually have results that are immediately available. And so that I was just at an event that our system was used at this past Sunday, and so the judges meeting. This will actually sound pretty wild, but the judges meeting was literally 5 minutes. So that it was, we went into the room, the results were available. The judges reviewed the results for a minute or two, and then the question was, do you agree, or are there any edits that you'd like to make? They looked at them, they agreed with the results, and so those were ratified. And then it was really a matter of, we spent the rest of the time figuring out who was going to give away the prizes to each of the different participants. And so they were confident, they liked the results, and so they were good with them. You'll see situations where maybe there are virtual ties where it does make sense to flip places and whatnot, and then it's really a matter of making sure there's a rationale to do that, and you wouldn't flip them unless there were. So, but it's making sure that the community knows what the rationale was, and but ultimately, if you can show the judges their consensus instead of having them have to discover their consensus through conversation, you're going to eliminate another opportunity for the scores to skew and become unreliable. So this information is really valuable for the ventures for a couple of reasons as well. And so when you think about these results for ventures, maybe it's easiest to think about how results work for maybe running events. So when someone looks at the event results from a running event, they're really looking at three different things. They're looking at, how did I do versus my own expectation, which in some organizations, they're actually sharing, maybe scores or the text feedback. Most organizations don't share both in terms of, what's normally shared. So imagine having both. And if you look at the qualitative and quantitative information, let's analogize this to driving your car. So when you drive your car, you have two significant areas of feedback. You have the information from the dashboard, and you have the information from what you see when you look out the windows. And so think of the dashboard as quantitative feedback. Think of what you see when you look out the windshield or windows as qualitative feedback. Now, if you took away one of those components of feedback, it would be very difficult to drive your car very well, and or if at all. And it's really the same in terms of qualitative and quantitative feedback from a standpoint of scoring. If we take away the text or the qualitative feedback, there's no context to the quantitative feedback. Just the same as if we just provide the qualitative feedback, that's out of context because we don't have the scores to amplify certain comments. And so we need both in order to properly make good decisions. So the number one way ventures use it is they look at this information to see how they did versus their own perspective. The second way they use it is to see how they did referentially. In other words, how did they do versus people that they know, reference points. And so whether they were first or 50th, having reference points. If you did well, we have yet to see anyone that scores perfectly. And so if they did well, there's still things they can improve, and seeing people that maybe scored better in certain categories or criteria than they did will give them reference points to improve their performance in those categories or criteria. Likewise, if they didn't perform well, then they've got models of people who did much better who they can mimic and adopt those skills and different attributes so that they become better and better at with their venture and in terms of how they perform. The third way this information is used, and you think about if you've ever run an event, before you sign up for the event, the first thing that you do is look at last year's results, or maybe even you look at the last few years' results. This is the Darwinian part of entrepreneurship. There is not there are very few places where you can go today, no matter what pitch event you want to sign up for, and see results from previous participants, see results from previous years or cohorts. And imagine having this information available so that not only number one is you take away some of the mystery in it so more people are likely to sign up, but two is you help them come in more prepared for success. And again, thinking about that running example, if you know what results from previous years look like, it informs how you are going to train to perform at a level that will make you happy. And that's exactly what you want to see happen, is how do we help set people up for success? How do we help them stand on the shoulders of previous participants? And this information not only is helpful for the judges and ventures, but it's also helpful for the organizer. So how do we, the organizer obviously can look at how ventures perform through a progression or series of events. This data becomes informative in terms of optimizing programming and so on. And ultimately, it allows better mentorship. It allows a variety of things to happen that amplify the type of programming an organization can offer and how they improve those offerings. So, and I know we're running a little short on time, so we're going to finish up here. We're going to go to the questions. We're probably going to, just so you all know, go about 10 minutes over, maybe as much as 15 minutes over. And I do apologize. We did start a few minutes late with my sound issue, but I want to at least inform before we get to the top of the hour kind of the plan here. But we want to cover this info. If you can stay with us, great. We're recording it, and we'll certainly share the recording so you can catch the last 15 minutes if you have to hop out. So this slide's really important, and this really kind of overviews the whole process about judging. So when you look on the y-axis, the left axis, our participants they move from novice to expert as they ideally as they go through our program, or it's going to be part of our assessment in terms of what level we want to give them feedback on. But as they move more to expert, we want to move more to being direct in our feedback. And as we do that, we move from being focused on gaining their commitment to helping them improve. And this is really sort of underscores what we're trying to do here from a judging process, is really to help make sure that our judging is aligned with this continuum. So again, we're going to be much more focused in the early stages on form, making sure that they're excited, they're interested, they're passionate, they've got the basic communication skills down. And then as they move forward, we're going to focus much more about what they say than how they say it. And of course, we're going to assume that how they say it has already been covered, and that we now have the liberty to move forward to talk about the actual what's there. Is as a friend of mine says, is there something there? And that's really really key. So we want to get to your questions, and just one slide before we do that, and this will give you a quick preview of our next webinar, which will be on Friday, April 22nd. It's going to be Propel Your Teams, and it's going to be all about using stage gates to ramp up success. And this is something we've seen in several programs that we've had the chance to take a look at, that some organizers, some organizations are using stage gates in a very effective way to incent and to drive progress and success of their teams. And so we want to share some of what we've seen there, and hope you can join us for that. We'll be at the same time, noon Eastern Standard Time. And again, we hope you can join us. So let's get to your questions. I'm going to stop my screen sharing and come back on screen. So guess it'll just take me a second to transition over. Okay, I should be back on screen. Hi, everybody. You'll see my friend here in the background. He's actually covering up a window that would be very bright. So there's actually not only it's fun to have that funny person over my shoulder, but they're actually playing a role. So let's hop into the question. We have roughly about 15 questions, and actually there's some good meat here. There's some that we'll have answered, and we'll just note that and move on. So the first question is, what does it take to make good judgments? So kind of an overarching question here. If I were going to give that a one-word answer, I'd say context. Context is really, really key to making good judgments. So if we know kind of the framework within which we're sort of ideally making this judgment, then it's much easier to make good judgments. So the next question, it's a little bit long, bear with me. We have a program where we work with early stage technologists, but our judges are used to seeing later stage startups seeking funding. So their expectations about what makes a good team does not always line up with what our program is designed to do. And I'm assuming there's a question in there, which is, so how do we deal with that? And I'd say there are really two things. Number one is you might want to think about your judge selection process. I think what gets you want to have judges that are interested and excited in coming back, and if they're not, if this isn't an area that is interesting and exciting for them, in other words, if companies are such an early stage that that it's not really in their wheelhouse, then they might not be that excited about participating. So getting people who are more excited about working with that stage company might be better. And the other is, I haven't seen a situation yet where even a more sophisticated judge can't be very helpful if they have good context. So in other words, if you let them come in and have their context, which is, they're thinking of, are these things scalable, and your ventures are less mature than that, then we're not setting the judges up for success in not, at least for this moment, reframing their context so that they're evaluating these ventures on criteria and applying the criteria that are much more aligned with what will be informative and valuable for those ventures at this time. And it is nothing more discouraging than seeing an evaluation that is way too sophisticated for the participants. And so we want to make sure that that's aligned and in fact is informative. So again, this question's a little longer. Not enough time or thought put into criterion by judges as a group. Typically, facilitator gives a sheet to fill out, and then the judges begin to argue about what each one meant in relation to their preconceived notion. So this is clearly where orientation and facilitation come in. So first and foremost, the criteria should be yours, not the judges. So you develop it and share it with the judges, and they implement it. And again, if we facilitate that well and we give them context, you should be much, much better off. But just sort of letting them sort of go willy-nilly and make things up, ultimately you're going to be misaligned. It'd be very unusual that they would be able to read your mind and apply sort of what you intended, unless you've well laid it out. So next, how to maintain consistency in judging across many different projects with different judges. I think, first is to have a common process. What are you doing, against across these different programs, and then creating a consistent process. Now, that may mean that at different stages you have different criteria, but ultimately that you follow a common process so that, people can interchange and graduate to various roles and not have to learn something totally new. Again, you might evolve the criteria for different stages, but keeping that consistent or common process would be probably very helpful. Next, how do you maintain simplicity in criteria? So yeah, I think, and you'll see when you get the criteria development worksheet, that this will really help you develop simple and clear criteria. And there's really something elegant about simple and clear criteria. And in fact, quite often we see organizations that have way too many criteria for the event. And what ends up happening is, if, let's say, for example, there are 3-minute pitches, and we actually were at this event recently where there were 3-minute pitches and 12 criteria. So the judges needed a fair amount of time to wait or rank those criteria in between each pitch. And not only that, the more criteria there were, the less text comments the judges could give. So the criteria helps, and the more there are that acts as guides, but after a while the judges are just filling in any number just to get by it. I mean, it was too many. And so there's a balance, and actually our criteria development worksheet will help you determine how many criteria you should have as a proportion to the length of the pitches. And that may not be the 100% answer, but at least it'll give you some good guidelines. So, but how do you create and maintain simplicity in criteria? I would say first, start with a very, very clear goal. Make sure that your goal, the outcome you're looking for, is really clear, and then align everything you're doing to that. Let's see, next, getting judges on the same page and focus on our criteria rather than their own. I think that's simply orientation, making sure there's good orientation. If you have a facilitator, that's great as well. How do you ensure that your judges stick to your criteria and not their internal biases? Again, I think this is orientation and facilitation. Let's see. How do you develop an effective rating system and score sheet given the conflict of priorities among judges? So making sure that you have context and again, good orientation and facilitation. Next question. Are there any software or other tools that can be used to make the judging process easier for the judges and add transparency to the process for both the judges and participants? I promise you, I did not write this question. So thank you for whoever wrote it. Yeah, Score My Pitch, the great tool for this. We're happy to talk to you afterwards. And it is exactly what our tool was designed for, and we'd love to talk to you about it. So the whole idea of the tool is to capture the wisdom in the room and create reliable results and really make it administratively easy to do so. So let's see, next question. How do we get judges to stay within the allotted time frame? It's really by having a clear process and making it easy for them to execute what you want them to do. It also sometimes, again, without an event MC, and I've been to events where just the ventures just come up in succession, and before you know it, the judges are way behind, and it ends up not being sort of fair because the judges don't have time to get even the criteria scored, let alone making any text comments. And so having an MC that can control that cadence is important. Besides a process that's fast and efficient, making sure that the other side is sort of having somebody who can run the program. Let's see. How do you feel? Oh, I'm sorry. How do you deal with judges who may not understand a particular industry, but will write off an idea because they don't understand rather than asking more questions? Again, I think this is an orientation thing. The one thing, I guess, to me, and I'm going to read a little bit into this question because we get to see a lot of these kinds of situations, is So one of the things I see happen periodically is where organizations either sort of because a judge doesn't agree with their point of view, they devalue that judge's comments, or maybe the judge doesn't have ideal insight into a specific industry. And if the pitch event is all focused on a specific industry, well, that's really your fault, right? You want to make sure the judges have that background that's complementary to what you're going to give them a view of. It's not their fault they don't know about it. But the issue, it's funny. So we have this resistance to sharing feedback if we don't feel it's perfect. And I guess I would ask you what you think. Do all customers give good feedback? Do all employees give good feedback? Do all vendors give good feedback? I think we're really doing a huge disservice to the ventures that we're trying to influence by protecting them from any feedback or from all feedback. Ultimately, feedback, it's not about the feedback itself. It's about how we rationalize it, how we internalize it, what we discard, what we keep, what we seek to understand better. All comes from us processing more feedback. And the less feedback we have the ability to learn from, the less data points that we'll be able to evaluate to make better decisions. And so, again, when you're driving your car, you don't put your hand over your eyes part of the time. You continually look out the windows. And sometimes there are things that, are irrational that you see, but ultimately you filter through those. Driven through snowstorms or rainstorms or whatnot, where your visibility isn't as good as it should be. But boy, oh boy, if you don't get all that data in, you get some false positives and so on. But if you don't get all that data in, you ultimately don't have all of the data points that help you make good decisions. And it's really about our ability to listen and to interpret data as it comes in that helps us better at making decisions. So I'd less worry about the judge themselves and more worry about how do we better educate our ventures to internalize and action the appropriate feedback. And so it's really about their ability, their inquisitive nature to be able to understand what's being said, the context with which it's being said, and to then make decisions about its value to their situation. And there's no, I mean, there's no perfect sort of pitch evaluation, right? I mean, all we're getting is somewhere between a 1 minute and maybe a 5 minute view of these ventures. That certainly, even with the best pitch, that's probably not going to give us an ideal perspective in terms of where that venture is. Some are going to be better than others, there's no doubt. But to say that, that we're going to have that the pitch 100% represents the venture, and or that the assessor is going to have 100% ability to intake that information and reflect back their view, I think we're overestimating the process. I think the perfect can be the enemy of the good in this situation. We really want to have a very good process, and we want to share that so that people can learn how to read the tea leaves. Let's see, next, and just two more left, so bear with me. How do you make sure judges are prepared and have read background information? So really good question. And again, judges more often than not are important people, VIPs and so on. And so we want to be very conscious of their time. So if we want to make sure that they've done something, then we need to set up systems that allow us to track compliance. And so it may be that we make it real easy and we have some orientation sessions that take them through the information. Or it may be, and I know this is the case more often than not, is that there's the judges, and maybe it's a virtual first round of a competition or whatnot. They're going through a whole bunch of different applications or business plans or whatever it might be, and they're divining sort of scores for each of them. Or maybe they're reading some pre-information so that they're prepared for the event. I don't, in that situation, I don't think you're going to have an even distribution in terms of, if you have 5 or 10 or more judges, they're all going to do it at different levels. So they're not going to come in with the same understanding. I would just suggest, if you're looking for fairness, if they're going to read the information, you want them to read all of it consistently, or sort of none at all. and so you just, it's more about them being consistent in terms of not just having read information on 2 or 3 or 4 of the ventures, but to have read all 10 or whatever number. That's probably more important, is that their viewpoint is thorough and or consistent. Is there a way to make it statistically accurate? So in other words, is there a way to make judging statistically accurate? Yeah, absolutely. So if we can take out those 2 big issues that we talked about, both in terms of score skewing in the as the judging is happening live, and then if we can take out the skewing that happens in the sort of open judge caucus or meeting post pitches, those 2 things will make our scores much more statistically accurate. And ultimately, again, the perfect is the enemy of the good here. This is all feedback, and the important thing I think to realize here is all feedback is perfect. So feedback is literally, it's just simply somebody's viewpoint on something. And so in the case of pitches, we have whatever number of people have viewed pitches. Anything that they're going to share with us is their perspective, and to discount their perspective is like, imagine scoffing at a customer's perspective. Again, we might not weight this customer's perspective as important or as credible as this customer's, and that's cool, but we don't want to, there in each thing that we might discount, there maybe 1 or 2 nuggets that we'd want to know about and keep. And so I would suggest that we view the feedback as perfect. It may not be aligned or appropriate. It may, there may be things that they didn't understand when they gave that feedback that may have, and had they understood them, may have changed the feedback they gave. But the feedback itself is perfect. It was based on sort of it was based on what they saw in that moment, and we get sort of that information. So I would suggest that all feedback is sort of statistically accurate. It's just how do we teach people how to properly understand it, internalize it, and then action it. In the end, that's kind of the key. So, well, I thank you. We did go a few minutes long. I do apologize. We did start late with our little technical snafu. Please let us know how we can be of assistance. Hopefully we answered all of your questions. I'm guessing there are still a few gaps, and we'd love to have additional conversation. We will do some follow-up. We'll send you a link to this video. We'll also send the criteria development worksheet, and we'd certainly love to answer any questions that you have. So we hope you have a great rest of your day, and you'll see follow-up from us, I would say, by tomorrow, and then please let us know how else we can be of assistance. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Bye for now.